Welcome to Math Anxiety Coach. My name is Samantha Fay, and we have conversations on topics to help alleviate math anxiety. Does this sound familiar? You don't like to ask questions because you don't want to sound stupid, or maybe you don't even know what questions to ask. Today, we are going to talk about how to ask effective questions. You may have heard the saying, there are no bad questions. That might be debatable, but there are definitely ways to ask questions that make them more effective. Asking effective questions is especially important for online students because communication between student and teacher is more challenging and time-consuming. Here are a few pointers for asking effective questions. Number 1, be specific. A statement like, "I am lost," may start the conversation, but really doesn't give the teacher or tutor any information on where to start. Statements like, "I'm really confused on lesson 3-5, gives more information. But can you help me on question 20 in lesson 3-5, will allow the teacher or tutor to really focus down on the exact trouble point. Number 2, start with the last concept you understood. Have you ever asked a question, then the teacher or tutor started explaining things you already know? If you start the question with what you already know, then the teacher can start with where you are actually confused. An example of this might sound like, "I know how to do the AC number, but I don't know how to factor with it." Or, "I can solve equations without parentheses, but I get really confused when the parentheses show up in the equation." Starting your question with a statement of what you already know allows the teacher or tutor to start the explanation at the correct point. Number 3, if possible, show an example of your work. An example is the easiest way to show where the mistake lies. For online students, this might mean typing up the problem or attaching a picture of your work. An example problem allows the teacher or tutor to see exactly what steps you have performed correctly and where the mistake is. I especially encourage this if you are in the "I don't know what to ask" category. If you don't know what to ask, then attempt a couple of problems and bring them to the teacher. The teacher can generally see the mistake and help you from there. Number 4, find the resource that works for you. Your teacher is there to help answer questions. It's a part of why your teacher became a teacher. I encourage you to use him or her as a resource, but there are other resources out there. Tutors tend to be the next in line as resources, but don't forget classmates and even YouTube. YouTube will have lots of videos explaining all sorts of math concepts. Your teacher or tutor might even have a favorite go-to YouTuber that explains the concepts well that you are learning. And finally, not a tip for asking effective questions, but a couple of suggestions on when to ask the question. If you are in class and a concept doesn't make sense, ask a question then. Chances are some other student is confused too. The question will help you both. Maybe you want to wait and ask your question after class. That's a good time too. Then you don't have the stress of the other students. Finally, if you are working on a practice problem and you are struggling, allow yourself to struggle for 10 to 20 minutes, then try a different problem. If you are struggling with that problem for 10 to 20 minutes also, it's time to stop and ask a question. I hear of students who spend hours spinning their wheels not understanding a concept. That's not an effective use of your time and will just leave you frustrated. Questions are an essential part of how we learn. Learning to ask effective questions is a skill that takes practice to develop. Remember, be specific, start with what you know, provide an example, and find a resource that works for you. I hope that this gave you some ideas on how to ask effective questions, and I look forward to our next conversation.